KwaZulu-Natal Education MEC Kwazi Mshengu joins me now. Thanks so much for your time this evening on SABC News. We're hearing that over 600 schools have been affected. Just give us an update on the latest on schools there.
Well, the reports indicate that 630 schools have been affected in the province, and obviously the damage will vary from one school to another. There are 101 schools which are partially inaccessible, and by that we mean that, as we know that children or key learners who are attending a school will come from different areas. So there will be learners from particular areas who will not be accessible, will not be able to access their schools because of damaged roads and bridges. But thus far, we don't have a school that is completely accessible. And obviously, the issues of inaccessibility will also affect the educators themselves because they come from different parts of the province. So that is the situation that we are facing thus far.
What's going to happen tomorrow?
Well, the first thing that we need to acknowledge is that at least for the next 2 weeks, there will be disruption of teaching and learning in the affected schools, not only because of the infrastructure that has been affected or damaged, but precisely because we'll only get to know the full extent of damage suffered tomorrow when schools open. We expect that in certain schools, for example, there will be equipments and other teaching materials that would have been affected, and we can only know tomorrow the extent of such damage. But tomorrow, we are opening all our schools, and what we have given as a directive is that for learners that are not able to access their schools, must present themselves to the nearby schools, because we have also identified that in certain areas, learners are attending what we call schools of choice. So they will leave a school nearby and decide to attend another school, which is now inaccessible. So we are saying that in order to avoid the teaching and learning time, they must present themselves to nearby schools, and principals of all schools have been made aware that they must be able to accept those learners. But in other schools also, we will now be following, at least for the next 2 weeks, what we call the rotational timetabling, because certain classes have been affected and certain have been spared. Certain classes have been spared. So we will be prioritizing, for example, when it comes to a secondary school, we'll be prioritizing matric as well as grade 11, who must be attending at least on a daily basis, and other classes must then rotate until we are able to deploy all the mobile classrooms that are required. So those are the intervening measures that we are putting into place. We are also looking into other government precincts to see if there are schools that are not really accessible by a huge number of learners, and as well as educators, if we can't use those government buildings as a temporary structures for teaching and learning, while we work with Department of Transport in particular to make sure that roads and bridges are attended to expeditiously.
Could you talk to me about the other measures that you may have in place, perhaps learning packs for, being dropped off for children who can't access the schooling in the manners that you've been describing, one? And two, are you working with anyone in the private sector or other departments in order to try and mitigate the challenges that school-going children are going to face in KwaZulu-Natal going forward?
We are working with a number of NGOs and other private sector stakeholders, which are coordinated through the Office of the Premier. Some have also indicated that they would want to make donations for schools that are not extensively damaged, for them to be repaired speedily. But also we are providing psychosocial support to our learners, working with the Department of Social Development as well as Department of Health, because we understood that there's so much trauma that has come with this disaster. There are learners who have lost literally everything. They have lost homes, they have lost parents, they have lost siblings, including those kids who have not lost anything, but they will be affected by the fact that some of their counterparts have lost their lives. I mean, as it stands, the province have counted a number of 57 learners who have actually lost their lives. So we're putting in place in all the affected schools, psychosocial support services in order to give counseling to all those learners. But as I said, that between now and at least in the space of 2 weeks, we will be managing disruptions. And there may be instances where, depending on what we discover tomorrow and the coming days in a particular school, we may decide that particular learners must at least must not attend until a particular period. But even in those instances, teachers are stand ready to give homework to these learners or work that can be done outside school, so that they don't necessarily lose all the learning time. You will recall that even before we reopen schools tomorrow, we have already lost, I think, 2 days before we closed for a longer weekend because of these floods. We had to close about 500 schools earlier so that we could save the lives of educators as well as our learners. So we are indeed dealing with a situation that is developing and complicating almost on a daily basis, but we are determined to make sure that we minimize the impact as well as the time lost.
Thanks so much for your time on SABC News this evening and the full view. KwaZulu-Natal Education MEC Kwazi Mshengu joining us there.